Welcome to lesson 3. As you can see, this lesson is set up a little bit differently from all of the others because in this lesson, we are going to be applying what we've been learning. So you should have a data sheet. Your homework from lesson 2 was to collect data on your students and input it into a spreadsheet, kind of like the one I have over here. And what we're going to do today is we're going to use that information to form our strategy groups. Again, if you don't have students right now and weren't able to get their scores, you are just going to use my data sheet with my make-believe students over here and their make-believe scores. That way, using this data sheet will at least give you the practice of looking for those trends, deciding which students should be together in strategy groups, so that when you do have students and their information, you'll be able to do this a lot easier. The other thing that we need for today, in addition to your data sheet, we also need the strategy group planning sheet, and you'll find this inside of your workbook. And on here, we are going to be looking at planning for 2 groups a day. And you'll see that I have enough here for 5 days because I generally like to plan out my strategy groups for the whole week. I told you they can change daily, but rather than sitting down daily to look at my data, I like to spread it out over a week and see what my students need. They may not all be practicing this same standard. Some of my other strategy groups might be focused on some other things. I may have students with accuracy goals. I may have students with fluency goals. So on day 1, I might be meeting with one group of students about this standard, and I might be meeting with another group of students about their fluency. But for the purpose of today, we're just going to be looking at this specific data, and we're going to be seeing which students would fit together. And then in our next lesson, we're going to be finishing the rest of this: the purpose, the modeling, the guided practice, the assignment. I'm going to be walking you through each step of your strategy group, and we'll talk about how to plan them out. So I usually start with my lowest students. I want to meet with them first in the week, and then that will allow me to see on this first day what they're able to do, what we really still need to work on, and then I can schedule them for the next day as well, because that's just going to let me continue touching base with them and helping them progress toward this goal. So I'm going to start by looking for red on my data sheet over here. We can see that Joey has been in red the entire time. So I am going to add his name for this group 1 strategy group. And then as I scroll down, I'm seeing Louisa has been red for most of the time. Her one yellow was a 72, so that was still pretty low. As I keep scrolling, I see Ed here is in that same boat. He has 2 yellows, but for the most part, he has been red. So I might pull him into this group. And then I see Mike is red all the way across the board as well. So he is also going to be in this first strategy group. And notice that there are only 4 students here. I don't want my strategy group to have more than 4 is probably our max, maybe 5 if you have another one that really fits in with them and doesn't fit anywhere else. But 4 is usually where I like to keep the number, because that really lets you talk to each student during that 10-minute strategy group, and it really lets you see whether or not they're understanding what they're doing. So these guys are going to be meeting with me first on the first day, and I'm going to also bring them down here to my second day, because one day isn't going to be enough with working on this standard with them. They are more than likely going to need more than one day of strategy groups this week. So when I look at the standard that I'm focusing on, I have it up here at the top of my data sheet. It's still that character standard that we talked about yesterday, but this standard has quite a few different strategies within it. We're looking at character traits, we're looking at their motivations, we're looking at their feelings, we're looking at how their actions contribute to the sequence of events. That's a lot within one standard. So for this particular group, because they're in red, I'm probably going to start with the most basic of this, which is the character traits. They may not even be able to identify character traits of the characters in their books, and they may need some direct instruction in that before we move on to any of the other parts of this standard. So for the standard, I'm going to put reading literature 3.3, but I'm going to specify here for them, we are really focusing on those character traits. Oops. There we go. Character traits are what we are going to be zooming in on, at least for this first day. And then if they show me that they've got that down, they really understand character traits, then maybe we'll be ready the next day to move on to motivations or feelings. But I'm going to really break this standard down for them so that I can make sure that they understand it. Then I'm going to look for my next group. My next group of students is going to be those who are mostly yellow, some red. Those next group that are not quite as low as that first one, but they really don't understand it very well either. So here I see that Ross has 2 yellows, but then he actually went backwards. He went down into red. So I'm thinking he's going to need some extra help here. I'm going to look at Bruno, we talked about yesterday. He's been green most of the time. He only has 1 red. I'm not terribly worried about him. Dolores has mostly reds. Her last score was, or mostly yellows, sorry. Her last score was a red, though. I might pull her in with Ross here because she's going downhill instead of up. If I put my scores in order of when they took these assessments, she started out yellow and now her scores have consistently dropped down. So I'm a little bit worried about her. I'm going to pull her here. Luis is already taken care of. Ed's already taken care of. Mike's already taken care of. Darcy here has some reds, a yellow. She's been making progress. You can see at the end here, she's in green. So she's definitely been doing better, but she didn't understand it over here. I might put her in this group only to check in with her. I told you strategy groups are super flexible. So if you pull her on this day and she's blowing it out of the water, she understands it completely, you can send her off to read or do whatever other activity your students are doing while you're pulling your strategy groups, because she already understands it and does not need that group. I just want to check in with her and make sure that she really is solid on it though. And then I might pull Derek from the bottom down here. He has some reds and some yellows. He kind of understands it, but has not mastered it yet. So I'm going to keep him with them. And now I've reached my 4 limit again, and I'm ready to think about what they need for this particular standard. I'm going to be continuing to work on reading literature 3.3. But these guys probably don't need the character traits as much. We might review traits, but then we're going to move on to their motivations and their feelings. So as you can see, I'm really just looking at the colors over here to see who to pull in groups. I'm going to stop there because if you are using this data sheet, I want you to take some time to practice, see if you can put another group together, maybe those yellow students who are making progress, but they're not quite there at proficiency yet. The green, let's talk about those students who have mastered this. Spencer is 100% good. Emily, I would probably say, has mastered it. She has 4 greens over here at the end, only her first one, and even that at an 88, she was getting close to mastery. So those students in green, I'm not going to be pulling them for a strategy group on this particular standard. They have already mastered it. So this is where I'm going to start thinking, if I've used up all of my students who need help with this standard, and I still have some gaps, maybe on day 2 here, if these guys really need another strategy group lesson, but these guys don't. Maybe they understood it, or maybe I want to skip a day with them and have them practice on their own and then have them come back to me on day 3 and check in. Whenever I have a gap in my strategy groups, that's where I'm going to see what do those other students need. Maybe they are ready to move on to a more complex character trait skill. So they've already mastered all of this. Maybe I'm going to look at the 4th grade standard and see what is expected of them with character traits in 4th grade. Maybe there's another standard that I've seen that they are really not getting, and I'm going to pull that in for them. Maybe they need to work on something with their fluency or their accuracy. When I was meeting with them in groups, they were really struggling with those multisyllabic words, and I'm going to pull them into a strategy group for that. So you really need to keep a pulse on your students, seeing what they already have mastered and what they still need to practice. And eventually that will just become second nature to you. You'll be taking notes all the time about which students you need to meet with for what specific strategies, and it will be much easier to put your strategy groups together. When you're getting started, I suggest starting with one data sheet, really just focusing in on that one standard and meeting with the students who need to practice it. All right, so your task for today is to go ahead, use either your data sheet and start putting together some strategy groups, or again, if you don't have your own numbers, use this data sheet and see if you can take it from there. We have a couple of the groups already formed. What would you do next? Which other groups would you put together so that you have your strategy groups planned out for the week? You can ask any questions you have in the forum. Also, if you have a data sheet that you want to share with me and see what I would do with your students, or if you have questions about specific students and where they would fit into your strategy groups, feel free to post it. Just do me a favor and get rid of student names just for liability. I obviously don't know the students in your class, but just to be on the safe side, you can just number them. So just get rid of the name and put a number in 1, 2, 3, 4. And that way we can talk about the students by numbers instead of using their actual names. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Go ahead and form your strategy groups. And then in our next lesson, we are going to be looking at the rest of this planning sheet. We're going to be talking about the materials you can use for your strategy groups, and we're going to be breaking down the parts of the strategy group lesson and talking about how to plan for them. I will see you in lesson 4.